Hello and welcome back to Q&As number 2. On this video, I'm going to talk about a number of subjects regarding the questions that you've asked me about. But first of all, I'd like to mention that we have the L1 Evo. We released the teaser, I think it was on Friday, and there we'll see a couple of pictures of the car, see some spec changes on the car. Enjoy the video will be a live video on Wednesday from Schumacher Racing. You'll see myself and Chris Ashton on there, and we'll be able to answer all your questions and hopefully talk about all the good points on the car. I'm looking forward to doing that. That should be really good. The other bit is have a look on our website. We've got a new website. Check out all the product that's on there. We've got a lot of stuff, and the new website will allow you to access the information a lot easier. So that's that. If you've already got an account, so hopefully you've sorted it all out, but you would have been sent an email and go through the various bits on that email that tell you how to access your accounts. One important thing I want to mention, as it is Christmas and we'll be hopefully giving our nephews, or if you have children, a remote control car, you're going to see the big smile on their face when they get to put a battery in that vehicle and drive it round, either inside the house, outside the house. It doesn't matter where they're playing with it, but the important part of all it is acknowledging that smile, and that's what we all did when we first had a go. When we first drove the cars, we enjoyed ourselves, and when I go to races, I sometimes see people not enjoying themselves, and you wonder then, why are you here? It's important to have fun. An example of that fun is on Tuesday night I was at the Silverstone RC Car Club in Northamptonshire, and they have a rally car heat, and there's only 4 or 5 cars going round, but they had a lot of fun, and I enjoyed watching every moment of them going round. They had big smiles on their faces on the rostrum, and afterwards they were even doing little donuts on the smooth surface next to where we were pitting, and it just looked like a lot of fun for them. And it reminded me of when I first got my cars and drove them up and down the road outside my parents' house, and it was amazing. I had control of an RC car. And you all need to remind yourselves, it doesn't matter what level you are at, if you're finding this stressful going racing, you need to work out what it is that will get you back to that kind of happy, fun moment with racing. Let's get on to questions. First question, it's to talk about UJs and CVDs. I've been asked again about them. I've mentioned it in a setup video, the difference, but for a quick 1 or 2 minutes, I'll just mention the CVD joint is a stiffer joint when you go through articulation and load. You have a pin slots for it to work through. If it's not greased, it'll bind up a lot, so always keep them greased, and that basically binds up so you get more forward drive. It makes a stiffening action for the rear end, so when you want to go through compression, what you'll see is that the rear doesn't really want to do that, it wants to stay flat and drive the car forwards, whereas a UJ joint allows the rear end to squat under power. It doesn't bind, and when you do the steering, or whichever one you do, if you're a stick person or a steer wheel, I know mainly the UK guys are on the sticks, is that you'll find that the car has more on power steering and goes over the bumps better. That's a key thing. So UJs, better on bumps, better for on power steering, but CVD joints, really good for forward drive. So if you're in a slippery surface, they're great. Low grip, they're great. UJs, brilliant for carpet and high grip AstroTurf, as well as bumpy tracks. If you want to run CVDs on the bumpy tracks that are lower grip, so you're at that compromise level, you need to look at your shock package, maybe thin the oil back down, you want a larger hole piston, something to counteract that, but there's a whole host of things you can do. Again, we can talk about that on future setup videos. Next question, we have 1 degree and 0.5 degree blocks. First of all, they're out there. I've been asked when they're coming out, but they're out now. They're in the little packets. You'll be able to see that there's 8 pieces in there, and you'll have the 1 degree and 0.5 degrees with the 4 degrees going down to 1.5. Get these on carpet tracks. You'll find that you get more rotation from the rear. You'll be on power, and the rear end will be braking away under traction, and that would be fantastic for those awkward tight corners that you have. 1 degree would be good to go to, especially with modified, just keeping a little bit of that forward drive that obviously you're always getting rid of it with all this power. It's wheel spinning and it's struggling if you've obviously only got 0.5. But leave that 1 degree on and you'll have good stability from the front, so it won't be too twitchy, and you'll have nice rotation from the rear, which will be perfect for you. Next question is, I got asked about hexes again. I have mentioned these things again on my setup videos, but if you're looking at hexes on the back of the car, what do they do if you go wider or narrower? Basically, you've got a pivot point on the car. Okay, that's your pivot point. If you run a wider hex, it gets further from that pivot point, and what you'll find is you'll get more forward drive from it. When you try and go through squat and roll, you'll find that the wheel resists roll more the further that point is away from that hinge pin. So it's actually resists roll, which generally gives you a bit of grip for forward drive, that is, but you won't gain side traction. And what I find is when you go narrower, you gain side traction. It allows the car to roll. The suspension goes through its motions when it's going through obviously the forces of the corner. On the front, when we go wider, makes the car generally more aggressive. You have your kingpin here and your wheel is here. The closer it is to that kingpin, the more stable your wheel will be, and your single contact patch will be about the same point. The wider the hex you have, the more the wheel will actually travel. So just consider that when you're putting wider hexes on the front. We generally run a narrower hex on the front unless we want more steering. On two-wheel drive, it's a little bit less so. I find you just lose a bit of stability. It's not a driven wheel, so it's a slightly different story, but because you are pushing the wheels further away from each other when you go around, this is happening, whereas you could have this happening. That's hexes. Next bit, I've been asked, how do you fit the shin splitter? I'm just going to put a little picture up here now and you'll see how it's assembled. You cut away the front bumper and you simply screw this piece in, and that's that. Make sure it's always screwed in nicely and you should be good. Next question is from Pete Lyons, father of Abe Lyons, a really nice pair that I enjoy seeing at racing, and Lyons RC on Facebook. Also, Alex Hayward and Pete Lyons do a fantastic podcast called 300 Podcast, or The 300 Podcast. You'll find it on Spotify and various other platforms. Have a little look for it, have a listen. They have a very nice way of coming across on the audio, and I was fortunate to have been on there recently. Well, I say recently, probably a couple of months ago now, let's call it 2. I enjoyed myself being on there, and Pete's always been very nice and kind about me, and I felt it's only right to advertise what himself and Alexander, or Alex Hayward, have been doing. Okay, his question is, what's your bearing maintenance schedule? Sounds very formal, but hey, if we follow a system, we're never going to fail. So we have the rear hubs. I like to change the rear hub bearings more frequently than most others, as well as the front hub bearings. These suffer a lot of the casualties of the crashes, and the wheel kind of puts a lot of force through them, so I replace them from time to time. I like to change them, let's call it every 12 meetings. Let's say I race every Tuesday and Sunday, or every Tuesday and Friday. I'll look at kind of a month and a bit in, we'll change them out. It's just keep an eye on them. If you've been driving really nicely, landing on all fours, then kind of just keep an eye on it. But if you had a lot of crashes, it's probably worth replacing them before that. And check, feel how nice they feel. If they feel nice when you put a bit of them under load and you turn them, that's great. But if you turn them, they sound kind of towards sort of the pepper grind they kind of feel, change them. Just get them changed and it'll be good. So just check that condition of them. Even if you want to change them and they still feel nice, get them out, keep them as a spare. You can always re-grease them or re-oil them. There's oils out there to do it. You just use them 3-in-1. I'd have to look into some bearing oils to suggest. Maybe that's a future video. On the transmission, I change the diff bearings from time to time. Again, probably around the same time that I do the hubs, just to get it done, make sure it's nice. The inner transmission ones should stay nice for a very long time. They don't have much impacting forces going on them, no thrust forces, so radial when it's going round. On the steering, you probably leave it on for the majority of the life of the car, so over a year you probably leave all your steering bits fine, but then change them just because it's just going to be nicer. You're going to get more and more slop off them the older that they get, so swap them out. Arguably just do it every 6 months maybe if you're racing kind of once or twice a week, but if you're racing loads and getting loads of practice in, I'd probably just change them every 3 months. Just make them nice. There's not many bearings there to do. On the 4-wheel drive, what I find is the idler gear, that reverse gear, is I used to change them out more frequently. They don't cost a lot, so you look at changing them kind of like once a month if you're racing it all the time. But if you're racing it 4 times a month, just keep an eye on them. Make sure they're nice. And that screw that holds them in, don't over tighten it when you do it in. Do it up with, put some, I like to use red Loctite, and do it up and don't crush it on, just do it up to kind of a snug touch, and that's enough to hold it on. Don't put these bearings under any extra loadings. Next question from Pete. He did ask me another one about front wing. You can run a front wing. It will gonna give you more steering in certain conditions. If it's a slow speed track, I don't believe it makes any difference at all. It just adds the weight, which sometimes adds inconsistency. On larger tracks, sometimes I find that it adds inconsistency, and we found it at Trenchon when we were at the Hoodie EOS. We were going around and the cars were looking alright. Took the wing off and it made the car just a little bit more consistent. I think it just wasn't adding anything extra. We're just looking at the predictability of what the front shocks are doing, as well as the geometry. The L1 motor position. The L1 motor position, as you'll know, most cars on the market have this, let's call it a trend, but going back to the BJ4 and the TC3 from the Associated and the J Concepts car, they had the motors in line with the shaft, and over the years this has evolved, whereas the Tamiya 511 and various other cars have had the motor running in line with the wheels. And the biggest difference is when you have the motor in line with that shaft. For a shaft drive car, it will make the car twist around and might make it feel more reactive and give you a certain feel coming out of the bends. With our car, where we have the motor going in line with the wheels and we have our belts connecting the front of the rear up, what you'll find is that you'll carry more corner speed. There's nothing fighting that corner movement, it's all in harmony. That's why you see touring cars with the same scenario. So we are pretty much the only car on the market now that has belt drives. It does scare some people, but I'm going to do some videos on talking how to set belts. But we've proven ourselves on many surfaces, and all surfaces in fact. On clay we came third at the Worlds. Maybe could have done better with a bit more knowledge. We tried our best. On carpet, we just lost that this year, but won last year at the EOS. But we're very strong in these conditions. Hopefully this year's EOS we managed to get back onto the top with the four-wheel drive. And then on AstroTurf, we've done very well this year. In the UK Nationals, we won 2 of those meetings, and we've been proving ourselves in so many areas. So we're really pleased with that. So believe in belt drives, they do work. And the motion of that motor, working with the wheels, it's just pure harmony. Whereas shaft drives, I've always felt that it's good in certain instances, but on high speed and on those corners, it will hurt it. But that's up to those companies if that's what they want to do. Next thing is from Colin Whelan from Ireland. I've become friends with Colin through the EOS season, and well, seasons, and it's been nice to get to know Colin. He's asked me about basically radio checks before a run. Obviously we're going to do a radio check before, you know, you've built the car and you've done all these things and set your endpoints and everything. But every run that you do, there's a chance that you've had a crash and you knock your steering out, or one of your track rods or your turnbuckles have just gone out a little bit, so your steering's out. And instead of wasting your practice laps going around and just adjusting your steering, well, that's not good. Why would you want to do that? Do it on the bench. Make sure that your wheels are where you wanted them to be, straight with, let's say, minus 0.5 degrees of toe out on the front. Make sure that when you do your locks, it's equal both sides, that you've got the same amount of kind of power draw when you do your locks and everything. I'm going to be doing a video on steering lock, done the footage already, just haven't got around to doing it yet, been quite busy. So make sure that your locks are good and it's straight, and check that on the floor quickly before you go out for your run. Make sure that's good so you're not wasting time. Focus. Your starting practice laps are going to get you in the right mood for doing qualification or your finals. But when you come to the power side of things, give it a rev, full power brake, full power brake, full power brake. Make sure it sounds as it normally does, and that should be good. And what I normally do, not a radio check, just make sure your slippers set nicely. And obviously we can go through that again on another video another day. The last question I have is from someone on YouTube. His name on it is Law Lesser. How much of an influence are wishbones from kit to graphite and yellow dot on the LD, and when to change due to track conditions, or how do you want the car to feel? That's a good question. On the LD and the L1 Evo, when we race on high grip conditions, we run the graphite arms, which are stiffer, as well as they're much lighter. So they're like 13 grams, I think, on the whole car set when you swap over to them. It's a brilliant weight saving. It's the difference between a kit body shell and a lightweight body shell. It's great. doing both of them, you're going to save a lot of weight on the car. On the kit wishbones that you have, they're stiff, very similar to the graphite wishbones on stiffness, but they don't carry the lightweight nature. And I'm sure there's some form of absorption of energy that they take different to the graphite wishbones. The kit ones are great for durability, but the graphite ones are fantastic for weight saving, but are not as strong. So bear that in mind. If you're someone that crashes a lot, that's not what you need. That's why the medium flex wishbone exists, the yellow dot. And the yellow dot is what we used at the Worlds. It's a softer wishbone, and it can twist and move around and help generate some grip. Where all the other bits aren't quite working, they can have that small bit of movement and absorb certain amounts of energy that give you that feeling that you want from the car. So generally, more responsive wishbones are the stiffer ones, as well as the lighter one will be even more responsive than the kit one because it is lighter. That unsuspended mass will be able to move around that little bit easier. So I hope this all helps. Don't forget to subscribe and like and leave a comment. I like to see the comments. I want to see what you'd like to see on a future video. And yeah, just enjoy racing. Like I said, have fun and encourage anyone to have fun. If you see them not having a good day, talk to them. And the other thing is, go see any racer that you don't normally talk to and just see how they're doing, see if you can improve their day. If you're a great racer and you think you can help someone, ask them if they need a hand. Have a look at their car on the track, let them know what you think of it. If you've just got into the hobby and you want to find out how to go better, go chat to those guys that are winning at your club. Ask them what they're going to suggest to make you go better on the track, and say, you know, will you watch my car? You can also offer them advice on their car. Maybe they won't listen, or maybe they will. But anyway, have fun, enjoy racing, have a good Christmas, and see you soon. Bye.